They didn't know that the man they called a dead end would become the reason I finally understood what a family is supposed to feel like. The last time my father spoke to me as his daughter, not as a disappointment, not as a mistake he needed to correct. I was 23 years old, standing in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, holding a mug of coffee I hadn't touched. He was in his suit already, the one he wore when he had depositions. He looked at me the way he looked at opposing counsel. Not angry. Just done. "You're making a choice," he said. "Understand that it goes both ways." My mother was at the table. She didn't look up from her phone. I left the mug on the counter. I didn't say goodbye, and I didn't cry until I was 3 blocks away, sitting in my car, hands on the steering wheel, going nowhere. That was 11 years ago. My parents are both attorneys. My father, corporate litigation, the kind of work where you bill $400 an hour and never once question whether you deserve it. My mother does estate planning. They met in law school at Georgetown, married the summer after passing the bar, and by the time I came along, they had already mapped out what the next 30 years would look like. I was part of that map. My brother was part of that map. Every school, every summer program, every acceptable boyfriend. It was all cartography. They were very good at it. I was supposed to go to law school. That was the understanding. Not a conversation we ever actually had. Just a fact, the way gravity is a fact. I went to UVA for undergrad, studied poli-sci, did exactly what the plan required, and then I met Owen. Owen was not part of the plan. He was a plumber. 26 years old, owned his own van, worked 7 to 4 most days, and then came home and read actual books. Not case briefs, not depositions. Actual novels. He had calluses on his hands and laughed too loud at his own jokes. And the first time I brought him to a dinner party with my law school friends, he spent 45 minutes talking to the host's retired father about fishing in Montana. Everyone else thought it was awkward. I thought it was the most genuinely kind thing I'd ever watched a person do. We dated for 8 months before I told my parents. I knew, going in, that it would not go well. What I didn't know was how surgical it would be. My mother asked what his father did. When I said his father drove a delivery truck before he retired, she nodded slowly, like a diagnosis confirmed. My father asked what Owen's long-term plan was, and when I explained that he was building his business, that he had 4 regular commercial accounts already, my father used the word ceiling. As in, everyone has one. You need to think about his. I told them I was 3 months pregnant 2 weeks later. That dinner, if you can call it that, we were all still standing in the entryway, lasted maybe 12 minutes. My father told me I was making a compounded error. My mother said that if I chose to continue the pregnancy and stay with Owen, I was choosing consequences she couldn't protect me from. She used the word consequences the way other people use the word grief. I told them I wasn't asking to be protected. I was telling them they were going to be grandparents. My father said, "Not if this is the path you're taking." And that was it. Owen proposed 6 weeks later in the parking lot of a Panera Bread because we just found out the baby was a girl, and he pulled the ring out of his jacket pocket right there between the car and the entrance and said he'd been carrying it for 3 weeks waiting for the right moment. And he just decided there was no right moment. There was just this one. I said yes. I was crying and I had a Fuji apple in my hand from the bag of groceries in the back seat, and I thought, this is the best thing that has ever happened to me. And not one person from my family is here. We got married at the county clerk's office on a Wednesday. Owen's mom, Ruth Ann, was there. His younger sister, Becca, who was 19 and cried the entire time. His uncle, who drove 2 hours and brought a sheet cake from a grocery store bakery. On my side, no one. My father did not call. My mother sent one text, 3 days after the wedding. It said, "I hope you know what you're doing." I read it twice, and then I put my phone face down on the bathroom counter, and I didn't pick it up again for an hour. I named our daughter Wren. She was born in April, healthy, 7 pounds 4 ounces, and she came into the world screaming like she had opinions about it already. Ruth Ann held her the first night when Owen and I were both too exhausted to move. I watched this woman I'd known for less than a year, rocking my daughter in a hospital recliner at 2 in the morning, humming something I didn't recognize, and I thought, my mother doesn't even know this baby exists. I called her the next day. Left a voicemail. Said Wren was here, said she was healthy, said I thought they should know. My father called back. Not my mother, my father. He said congratulations in a voice that sounded like he was leaving a message for a client he didn't particularly like. He asked if we needed anything. I said no. He said to take care of myself. That was the whole conversation. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I know, because I stared at the call log after we hung up. After that, silence. For years. Owen's business grew. Not overnight. Nothing honest grows overnight, but steadily, the way a good foundation holds. By the time Ren was 4, he had 6 employees and a contract with 2 property management companies that kept work coming in year-round. He bought a house. We bought a house, 3 bedrooms, fenced yard in a neighborhood in Richmond where people actually wave at each other when they walk by. We weren't rich. We were stable. Which felt like more than I'd understood stability to be. Ren started kindergarten and immediately became the kind of kid who corrects the teacher when the teacher reads a word wrong. She got that from me. She got her laugh from Owen. I found work I loved. I'd started freelancing in legal content writing, which was basically the universe's way of letting me use my degree without having to become my parents. I worked from home 3 days a week. I coached Ren's soccer team 1 season and was spectacularly bad at it, and she still talks about it. We had dinner together almost every night. My brother Philip stayed in contact. Quietly, the way he did everything. He texted on birthdays. He came to Richmond once when Ren was about 6 and took her to a science museum and bought her a book about deep-sea creatures that she carried around for 6 months. He didn't talk about our parents, and I didn't ask. He was navigating his own version of that relationship, and I wasn't going to make it harder. Once, when Ren was 7, she asked me why she didn't have grandparents on my side. I told her that sometimes families have complicated histories and that she had Nana Ruth Ann who loved her more than anything. She thought about this for a moment and then said, "Is it because of Daddy's job?" And I had no idea how she'd arrived at that conclusion. But I said no, absolutely not. Daddy's job is important and good. She said, "I know, he fixed Mrs. Patterson's leak," and she cried. She was 7. She already understood more about human dignity than my parents ever taught me. The call came on a Thursday in October. I was at my desk, working, coffee going cold beside me the way it always does. Unknown number with a Virginia area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I don't know why I didn't. It was my mother. She sounded different, smaller. Not in volume, but in something harder to name. She said my name like she was checking that I was still there. I said, "Hi." She said she was sorry to call out of nowhere. She said she'd gotten my number from Philip. She said she didn't know where to start. I didn't help her. I sat very still and I waited. She started with my father. He'd had a stroke 14 months earlier. I hadn't known. She hadn't called. He'd recovered enough to be home, but his speech was slow now, and his right hand didn't work the way it used to, and the medical bills, even with insurance, even with their income, had become something they were actively managing. She used that phrase. Actively managing. She used that phrase. Actively managing. Even in crisis, the lawyer in her surfaced that wasn't why she was calling. She was calling because my father's kidneys were failing. He needed a transplant. He was on the list. His blood type was O positive, which is common, which sounds like good news but means the wait list is long. His doctors had suggested they reach out to family members to explore living donation. My brother had already been tested. He was not a match. I understood, before she finished the sentence, why she was calling me. I sat with the phone against my ear for a long moment. I could hear her breathing. "How long has he been on the list?" I said. 8 months, she said. "And you called me now." She didn't answer that directly. She said, "I know I don't have the right to ask this." "No," I said. "You don't." Another silence. Then she said, "I know." I said, "You don't." Another silence. Then she said, "I know." I told her I needed time. She said, "Of course." I asked her to send me my father's medical information through Philip, because I wasn't ready to have more conversations about this yet. She said she would. She said thank you. She said thank you. She said my name again at the end, quietly, and I don't know what she meant by it. I hung up and sat at my desk for a long time without moving. I told Owen that night after Ren was in bed. We were in the kitchen, and I just started talking. Laid it all out, start to finish, including the parts I hadn't let myself feel yet. He listened without interrupting, which is something he's always been good at. When I was done, he was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" I said I didn't know. He said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I just need to know that you're deciding it for you and not because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. That's the thing about Owen. He doesn't tell me what to feel. He just makes sure I know I'm allowed to feel it. I got tested. I needed to know whether I was even a match before I could make any real decision. I went to the transplant center with my information, went through the screening, gave blood. I didn't tell my parents I was doing it. I was a match. I sat in my car in the parking garage afterward and I called Philip. He picked up on the second ring. I told him. He said, "Oh, then, how are you doing?" "I don't know yet," I said. "I genuinely don't know." He said, "You don't have to do this." "I know." "And if you do," he said, "that doesn't mean you're forgiving them. Those are two different decisions." I hadn't thought about it that way. I sat with it. I drove to their house, the house I grew up in, on a Saturday in November. Owen offered to come. I said I needed to do this part alone. He kissed me on the forehead and told me to text him when I got there. The house looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I just didn't shrink the way I used to when I walked up to that door. My mother answered. She looked tired in a way that was new, not stressed, just worn. She stepped back to let me in. The house smelled the same, which was disorienting. My father was in the living room, in a chair I'd never seen before. One of those adjustable ones, positioned near the window. He looked up when I came in, and something moved across his face that I wasn't sure I'd ever seen there before. We sat in the same room for the first time in 11 years. My mother made tea. Nobody drank. My father's speech was slow, but it was there. He said my name, just my name, the way my mother had on the phone, like he was checking, like he needed to say it out loud to confirm something. I didn't come to perform reconciliation. I want to be honest about that. I didn't come with a speech about forgiveness or a checklist of things I needed to hear. I came because I needed to look at the situation in person before I could trust my own decision. I told them I was a match. My mother's hand went to her mouth. I told them I had not decided yet. I told them I needed to say some things and I needed them to just listen. They listened. I told them that Owen is the best person I have ever known. Not in spite of his job, but without any caveat whatsoever. I told them Ren is 11 years old, and she has never once seen her maternal grandparents, and that is a loss I gave her without her consent, and I'm still sorting through how I feel about my role in that. I told my father that his stroke happened, and I didn't know, and I needed him to understand what that says about the wall that got built. Not just by me, but by the choices this family made when I was 23 years old and standing in the entryway of this house, being told that loving the wrong person had consequences. My father listened to all of this. When I was done, he said, slowly, working around the parts of his speech that still didn't cooperate, that he was sorry. Not for everything, the way people say when they mean nothing. He listed specific things. He said the word ceiling had been wrong. He said that watching his son-in-law not exist in his life for 11 years because of his own arrogance was something he'd had time to think about. A lot of time. My mother said she'd been afraid. That they'd both been afraid of what it meant for me, for my future, and that they dressed that fear up as principle, and that was the cruelest kind of dishonesty. I don't know if I believed all of it. I think I believed enough. I went home and I talked to Owen for 3 hours. Then I called Philip. Then I spent a week sitting with it, going on runs, making dinner, watching Ren do her homework at the kitchen table, trying to understand what I actually wanted. Here's what I kept coming back to. I was not going to make this decision based on guilt. I was not going to do it to earn something. Their approval, their love, some version of the family I used to want. And I was not going to refuse out of anger, because anger as a compass tends to point you away from things rather than toward anything real. I asked myself, if my father were a stranger on the list, and I were a match, and I had the health and the means, what would I do? I knew the answer. I called the transplant coordinator the following Monday. The surgery was in January. I won't pretend it wasn't hard. The recovery took longer than I expected, and there were 2 weeks where I felt like my body had been through something it was still processing. Owen took time off work. Ruzanne came and stayed with us for 10 days and made soup and kept Ren's schedule running and did it all without being asked. My father's surgery happened 48 hours after mine. He came through. I want to be clear about what happened after, because I think this is the part people get wrong in stories like this. There was no dramatic reunion. There was no tearful embrace at the hospital where everything dissolved. My parents did not suddenly become the people they weren't for 20 years. What happened was slower and more honest than that. Ren met her grandparents for the first time in March. We had lunch at a neutral place, a restaurant nobody had history with. My mother brought Ren a book about marine biology because Philip had told her what Ren was into. My father was still moving carefully, still working through recovery, but he leaned across the table when Ren was explaining something about bioluminescence, and he listened to her the way I'd always needed him to listen to me. Ren, for her part, was polite and a little guarded, and completely herself. On the way home, she said, "They seem like they're trying." I said I thought that was right. She said, "Is trying enough?" I said sometimes it's where things have to start. She thought about this. "Okay," she said. "But I'm watching. She's 11. She's already better at this than I was at 30. Owen shook my father's hand at that lunch. My father looked at him, really looked, and said that Philip had told him about the business, and that he was impressed. Owen said thank you in a way that was genuine without being grateful in the wrong direction. He didn't need my father's approval. He never did. But he was willing to be in the room. That was enough for now. I don't know what this becomes. I'm not going to tell you we're one big family now, because that would be a lie and I've worked too hard to stop lying to myself about what this family is. What I know is that my father is alive, that my daughter has met her grandparents at least once, that my mother texts me now, not often but she does, and last month she asked if she could come to one of Ren's soccer games. I said yes. She sat in the bleachers and cheered at the wrong moments and didn't know any of the other parents, and at halftime, Ren jogged over and handed her a juice box from the team cooler, matter-of-factly, the way she hands things to people she's decided to include. My mother looked at that juice box for a second before she opened it. I couldn't see her face from where I was standing, but I think she understood what it meant. I gave a kidney to a man who told me, 23 years old and pregnant, that I was making a compounded error. I'm still working through what that means about who I am. Owen says I did it because I'm the kind of person who can separate what someone deserves from what the right thing is. I think that's generous. I think the truth is messier. What I know is this. I have a daughter who hands juice boxes to strangers she's decided to include. I have a husband who still makes me laugh too loud in restaurants. I have a home that feels like a home. Everything else, the repair, the distance, the careful and imperfect work of deciding what this family gets to be now, that's still ongoing. Some stories don't end. They just become something you keep choosing how to carry. I've thought a lot about what caused what in all of this. Not in a mystical way. I don't think the universe was keeping score or balancing a ledger somewhere. I just think actions have weight. And over time, that weight lands somewhere. My parents made choices when I was 23 that felt, to them, like standards, like protection, like the responsible thing people in their position were supposed to do. And those choices had consequences they didn't see coming. 11 years of a granddaughter they didn't know. 11 years of a son-in-law they'd written off before they ever learned his name. 11 years of a daughter who learned to stop needing them. You don't get to decide which consequences count. Owen never once asked my parents to reconsider him. That's the thing I keep coming back to. He just kept showing up. For me, for Ren, for the life we were building. And he did it without requiring anyone's approval to feel like it was worth doing. I used to think that was stubbornness. I understand now that it was integrity. There's a difference between knowing your value and performing it. Owen never performed anything. He just was who he was, consistently, in the parking lot of a Panera proposing with a ring he'd been carrying for 3 weeks, in the hospital when Ren was born, in our kitchen at 10 at night when I told him my father was dying and I didn't know what to do. That kind of steadiness doesn't come from credentials, it comes from character. Ren is the proof of something I couldn't have articulated when I was 23. She is growing up watching 2 people handle hard things honestly. She watched me wrestle with a decision that had no clean answer and make it anyway, not because I owed anyone anything, but because I could separate what was right from what was easy. She's going to carry that, not because I told her to, because she saw it. Children learn the things you actually do, not the things you say you believe. My parents spent their careers building arguments, making cases, defining terms. And the irony is that the most important thing they ever needed to understand couldn't be argued into place. Love that comes with conditions attached isn't really love, it's a contract. And eventually, the other party stops signing. What I know now, 11 years and one surgery and one juice box at a soccer game later, is that the people who show up for you without being required to are the ones worth building around. Ruth Ann in a hospital recliner at 2 in the morning. Philip texting on birthdays when it would have been easier not to. Owen, every single day, without fanfare. I gave my father a kidney because I decided I was the kind of person who could. Not because he earned it. Not because I forgave everything in a single phone call, but because I looked at who I wanted to be, and I made a choice that matched it. That's the only math I know how to do now. Some things you carry because they're yours. Some things you put down because they were never helping you move. And some things, the hardest things, you choose to carry anyway, with clear eyes, because that's what living on your own terms actually looks like.